So, Gordy Bal, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Tim. I'm excited to drop in with you.
Me too. I'm really looking forward to this. You're a heart-centered entrepreneur. I'm looking forward to getting into conscious thought revolution and CTR, and you're author of the new Millionaire's Playbook. I want to start from the beginning. You were a child of the internet. You quickly developed a knack for making money online. Like you knew you wanted to be rich, but tell us about growing up and how that shaped your journey.
Yeah. So, my parents were immigrant parents that moved from India to Canada with $20 to their name. And so growing up to immigrant parents that didn't have a lot of wealth and watching them really struggle made me create this reality and this meaning that, oh, I need to make a lot of money. And if I make a lot of money, I'll solve all the problems. I'll solve the problems at home. I'll solve the problems in the world because that must be the game to play. So because I thought that that's the game to play, that's what I put my energy, time, and focus and superpowers towards. And I was also lucky because being a child of the internet, the opportunities, it's kind of like what crypto has been over the last, 8, 9 years is like it's the wild, wild west. And so the internet was rampant with opportunities at the time. And so, I developed skills in online advertising and affiliate marketing and figured
Mhm.
out how to find inefficiencies in the online advertising space and create this equivalent of high frequency trading, sort of like what they do on Wall Street with stocks. I figured out how to do with advertising. And so it became very lucrative. And, I figured out the quote unquote money game, but it was, like nothing was getting better. Like I was still like, I was more depressed than I was as a kid. Things at home were still tough. The world seemed to be getting weirder and harder. And I was realizing that, even though my bank account was growing, I was feeling spiritually bankrupt. I was
Mm.
feeling like there's no meaning, there's no purpose. And so that kind of like, took me down a path of asking some deeper questions. But yeah, that's what it was like. I mean, it's fun though too as a kid because like, it I'm grateful now that because I pursued this game of, making money, it also equipped me with knowing how to help others win, because the
Mhm.
way that I knew how to, generate money was to create like win-win dynamics, right? I was like, how do I make it so everybody wins and then I win as a result of that?
Mhm.
And so come full circle, I'm seeing that, there's a way to also do that without having to, sacrifice my own soul and my own essence.
And that's it. And that's it. And everyone should get the book because it is awesome. And it's about 7 keys to unlock freedom, purpose, and abundance. And that's a big change, right? You obviously made a ton of money and was just like, this is working. But when did it shift for you? Like, when was this shift to becoming a new millionaire? And what is a new millionaire?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I'd say, there was a day in around the 2007, 2008 mark where I had a record six-figure day. So we generated over six figures of income in one day. And then I even went and bought the domain name CTR.com at the time, which in online advertising, for those of you who are in the online advertising space, CTR stood for click-through rate. So it was a success metric for advertisers that the higher their click-through rate, the better performing their campaigns would be. And so I bought that domain name, and then like, I'm thinking I'm clever and I'm going to create this auto optimization platform for advertisers to optimize their click-through rate. And then the 2008 financial collapse happened, and it was like that was the second big thing that happened because
Mm.
early in 2001 there was a 9/11 that happened, and that was one of those moments where I was like, what's really going on here?
Mm.
Like, what's really the game being played? Like, and I had a lot of questions about 9/11. I mean, I still have a lot of questions about it. And then so that happened, and then 2008 financial collapse happened, and then the Satoshi white paper came out in 2008 as well on the other side of the financial collapse. And that's what just started really getting me onto this like question of how does the world really work?
Mhm.
What is money? What is politics? What is government? What is pharma? What is education? Like, what are all these power systems that exist? How do they work? How did they come into fruition, and what are the incentive structures there? Are they truly here for the betterment of humanity, or are they designed in a way to extract from humans and the planet? And what I discovered was that it was the latter. It was a
Mhm.
rigged game that was designed to extract from everybody else and the planet. And so when I kind of like came to this realization that I was playing a rigged game, that's when I'd say I really started diving deep into the nature of reality and the nature of
Mhm.
consciousness, and asking deeper questions of not just like how the world works, but who am I?
Mhm.
What is the nature of reality? How does reality actually get rendered? What are the mechanisms by which our reality is created? What is the universe? What is human consciousness? And so this took me deep into what I would, call a spiritual inquiry, and really connecting to a deeper aspect of myself. And what I discovered in that journey was, firstly, I was given this download that our species does not need a higher click-through rate. What we need is a conscious thought revolution, which is how and why the new CTR.com was born.
Mhm.
And part of a conscious thought revolution is to rewrite the story and design a new game. The old story was we need to chase money and become a millionaire, and chase this elusive success phenomena that actually leaves you, empty and meaningless, to a new game where, instead of trying to make millions of dollars at the cost of everybody else on the planet, what if the game is to positively impact millions of lives? So the new millionaire is somebody who plays a game whereby they discover their purpose, they raise their consciousness, and they continue to improve their mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual well-being, and then generate abundance by truly expressing their soul essence. And so their business or their mission becomes a byproduct of their soul energy. Their focus, their daily motivation is, how do I positively impact millions of lives, starting with my own? And so
Mhm.
when you play that game, not only are you able to generate abundance and create and have, mission driven businesses, but you're actually making an impact, like a real impact,
Mhm.
like a
Mhm.
meaningful impact. And so that's the new millionaire. That's the game that I think we're ready to play. And as we have this massive wealth transfer from the old power regime, the baby boomer generation, to now the millennials and Gen Z generations. They have a different set of values. They care more about sustainability, regeneration, health, wealth, and they're defining wealth as health, not just like bank account. And so I think it's incumbent on people like us to support this next generation, because they're our hope. Like,
Mhm.
we got to leave this planet better. And being a father of 3 kids, I'm like, I got to help leave this planet better than I found it. And part of that is by playing and designing a new game.
I love this new game, Gordy. Like you are so you're in flow, my man. You're in flow. Like you're speaking my language. This is great. You really have spared no expense. When you went through that and you talk, I mean, there's a lot to unpack there, but like when you got to the point where you were like, I'm going to focus on mission-driven businesses only, it wasn't like you were saying the other businesses aren't successful. You shut them down and consciously shifted gears, right? That's a big thing to
Yeah,
call out.
yeah, yeah,
It
yeah.
wasn't
That
just
that was
you had successful businesses going that were doing things. You were chasing the click-through rate, obviously, and yeah, I have a background in advertising too, so, and I know about. I've been there, right? You're chasing either CPAs or click-through rates, and it's a conscious, like constant pursuit of that number, that metric, and it feels like it was guided, right? You bought that website, and it was there to be bought, but then it was
yeah.
bought, and then it opened up, and it led you down the path, but then became this whole conscious thought revolution. What did you do to find your purpose, or to find like what is purpose, and like how do we find our purpose?
Yeah, that's a really good question. That's the $1 trillion question. I actually walk through this 5-step process in chapter 2 of the book, The New
Mm,
Millionaire's Playbook. And so, for me, I invested a lot, because for me, it was so important to get clear on my purpose. Like, what am
mm,
I actually here for? Not just my human self, but why is my soul and my spirit really here? And part of it does start with the physical aspect of ourself. And step one, I call, is falling in love with your brain. And so all of us have each one of us have a brain that's so unique, like a fingerprint. No two brains are alike. So really understanding and accepting and falling in love with your unique brain. So an example before knowing my purpose was, for example, like, anything that was any task or project that was super detail oriented or was, inundated with spreadsheets or something, I would be hard on myself and I'd be like, oh man, this is not like, I'm not good at this, or my brain doesn't work this way. But when I started actually understanding my brain and the neurology and how it's structured, I realized, and there's this whole process that I did around understanding it, and I realized that my brain is actually highly conceptual and it understands concepts. There's this process called, it's an assessment called, it's one of many, called emergenetics, and it maps your brain. And so there's sort of four quadrants that everybody's brain's mapped into. It's conceptual, analytical, structural, and social. And most people are either what's called bimodal or trimodal. It means
Mm.
that they are evenly split between either two or three of those. What was revealed to me was that I'm 95% conceptual. And so my brain was referred to as unimodal. And so it's why also, like, I'm, seen as again considered like what a lot of people would call visionary. And a
Mm.
lot of visionaries are highly conceptual, is because they see the really big picture. They can see like the concepts that are hard to grasp for those of us who might be more detail and structural, which is like, how do I turn this into a task in Asana or a Gantt chart or a
Right.
spreadsheet?
Right.
And so when I started realizing that that's how my brain works, then I was like able to actually fall in love and appreciate it and be like, oh, this is my gift. This is my gift. I don't need to be focused on the things that my brain isn't equipped for. Then that's more about actually finding the right people to partner and collaborate and synergize with, whose brains are like that. And that's where collaboration and co-opetition instead of competition come together to really create innovation. So that was a real big part of finding purpose. And also then once you kind of go through the physical realm of self, then it's really, connecting deeply to your curiosity. As we grow
Mm.
older, as our software programming and code becomes so ingrained, we lose curiosity. But when we're kids, or we look at kids, they're extremely curious and they think limitless. And so it's important to really connect to curiosity, because your curiosity is the spark that wants to understand, what is real in the present moment, not just some story that we're mapping onto the reality, but something that's a spark of understanding itself. Because I always say, we are the universe experiencing and expanding itself through each one of us. Each one of us, even you and I, and anybody that's listening or watching this, each one of us are a unique vantage point of the universe experiencing and expanding itself. And so, and that's just really important to understand and realize, because it reminds us that we're interconnected. We're all interconnected. All nature, all living things, everything. We all come from stardust. And universe itself, universe means one song. We are
Mm.
the one song that's being sang. And so, if the universe is experiencing and expanding itself through each one of us, then it in itself is inherently curious.
Mhm. Mhm.
It is discovering and experiencing itself through each one of us to continue to grow and expand. And so for us to, you know, have our metacognitive awareness online so that we can quiet down the thoughts that are constantly playing, the bullshit thoughts, the ones
Mhm.
that don't serve us. We quiet them down and we connect to that part of ourself that is still connected to the universe. Then we tap into a curiosity. And when we tap into the curiosity, with the signals and the biofeedback signals from the universe are there, and those help us connect to our purpose. We can begin to listen to why we're really here. What are we really here to serve? What are we really here to learn? What is the impact we're really here to make? And those are some of the like important ways. And again, like I'll walk through this in chapter 2 of the book, which is around discover your purpose. And so that was a big part of it. And I think that's as we move into this world where exponential technology and artificial intelligence are really proliferating, it's going to be that much more important to reconnect to our soul and really have a spiritual awakening, because otherwise, like, the evolutionary algorithms of artificial intelligence will just use us. We're just giving it
Mm.
data. So it's important for us to not just be, data farmed by the mining algorithms. So and so that's why we have to operate in a way that is we're operating, call it quantum field, from a realm outside of the physical realm, because AI is already computing it's using quantum computing anyway. So we're just, if we're still analog, or it's that much more crucial for us to really wake up, discover our true purpose, connect to our soul, so that we can create from a place of true authenticity. And it's funny enough, like the 2023 word of the year, according to Merriam-Webster, is authenticity. And the
Mm.
irony there is crazy, because AI and social media has made it more difficult for
Right.
authenticity to be seen, because everybody's trying to look good versus actually show up in their true selves. And so yeah, I think these are some of the important textures of our existence in our time. And you and I, before we hopped on podcast, we were just talking about coming into 2024 and how this year is going to be a pivotal year for many reasons. And I think that's going to be one of them, is people really being like, shit, I need to connect back to my true self, my truest essence.
I think that's so powerful. I think, yeah, everyone should get your book and read chapter two because, yeah, when I read it, it stood out quite a lot that you put a lot of energy and effort into actually discovering this and then thinking about it. It's the thought process that you went through to find out that you already have what is your strength, but you're just ignoring it because the current system that we're in has taught you to think that you need to raise on all levels and be standardized and get good at every single thing. And then you feel shit because you haven't done it and you can't get there. And instead of going looking within and going, hang on, I'm amazing. I have these talents and gifts, and these are my talents and gifts, much like you're a visionary. That was your talents and gifts. Now it makes so much sense why you're already totally into crypto and decentralization. And then you marry that with your curiosity. And if you haven't got that going, get it going so that you become more curious, so that you can actually get that fire. Because that's how I feel when I think about Web3 and the revolution that we're going. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. When you realize, like, the system, you've literally just laid it out. There's a program that the world is on, and there's a program that we've invented, that we've created and innovated, that is already on the new framework. And we're just slowly moving across to that. I guess the question is, what does decentralization of power have to do with beating the matrix and the current system? Like, what is this all about?
Yeah, that's a really good exploration and question. Over the last few hundred years, power has continued to get consolidated, and all of these global events that happen. And I risk sounding like a conspiracy theorist, but if you just look at the facts, if you look at what happened in 9/11, post 9/11, all the regulations and laws were passed, like the Patriot Act and the Freedom Act, etc. And then in 2008, after the financial collapse, and you look at all the regulations that were passed for the financial system, and then now you look at, after the thing they call the pandemic, and you look at a lot of the things that were implemented, these are all ways. And in crypto world, they're called rug pulls, and these
Mm.
were all different rug pulls. These were all rug pulls by the power system to continue to consolidate and aggregate power and control. And I think the old system knows it's dying. It knows it's on its
Mm.
last legs. And so it's desperate, and it's trying everything it can to grasp a hold of and maintain power and control. But we're waking up.
Hmm.
Humans are waking up, and they're realizing more and more that there's a game, and there's certain systems that are utilized, like mainstream media is a system that's utilized to proliferate these agendas and this way to control and hoard power. And so when you have people like the Elon Musks of the world who are calling it out, and then the big he's like, hey, this is all bullshit. The big companies try to pull their advertising
Yeah.
from X. And I'm not saying Elon Musk is the role model to look after. I mean, he's got a lot of his own trauma, like a lot of us do. But the point is, he's at least conveying that he's going to stick to his principles no matter what.
Hmm.
And I think when you're, right or wrong, if you're able to stick to your principles and not be subject to a power system that's going to bribe you or blackmail you or try to control you, these are the sparks that are showing the rest of us that we are extremely powerful. And it's now incumbent on us to really have the power in our hands, in our minds, in our hearts, so that it is decentralized, so that we can co-create a new world, a new earth, a new reality. And that's where we are. And that's what Web3 is going to allow. That's what the DAOs are going to allow. I still
Mm,
think we're ahead of the curve. I think, we're still a few years away before seeing true application of decentralized autonomous organization, or I call it a decentralized autonomous organism. I think, but for those of us who are already tapping into this, and the creators and builders I know that are playing in this, it's really exciting. And so, I'm excited to see what the world will look like when, human beings see themselves as truly powerful to create a life and reality of their dreams, where they're not subjected to the matrix or a game that's been, curated for them that is not in their best interest. And a lot of people had been, the proverbial red pill. A lot of humans have taken the red pill, and they're like, okay, I don't want to play that game anymore.
mm,
That
mm,
old game sucks. And so that's why I think, like, part of this new game of, the new Millionaires game is a fun game to play, because now you're actually living from a place of impact, not just, I want a power and money, but it's like, no, I want to make an impact. I want to
mm.
actually help move our species forward. Yeah. Anyway, it's and when you look at, like, speaking of, like, the old power system, like, I still find it immensely crazy that, like, someone like Bill Gates over the last few years has accumulated the most farmland in the United States. He is the largest owner of private farmland in the US. And he's also got all of he's got all of this IP and patents around, whether it's geoengineering or these
Mm.
new genetically modified
Mosquitoes
and
and
it's
stuff,
just, when you
yeah.
look at all,
Yeah.
yeah, when you look at it all, it's just like, how is that actually good? Like, who puts someone like him in such a position of power that gives, yeah, it's mind-boggling for me. And I think, the more, and I mean, I don't know him personally, and maybe he is a good human and stuff, but I can't help but look at some of these holders of massive power, and then I wonder, like, are you actually doing your own personal development? Are you doing your growth work?
Mm,
Are you looking at your own traumas? Like, you just, you were on Jeffrey Epstein's plane how many times? Your
mm,
wife just split up with you, obviously, like, and then I look at, not to throw shame or shade, but I think he drinks like a Diet Coke every day or something. So, like, part of I talk about is your mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual well-being. And we see people like,
mm.
these power brokers in the world that are, living in ways that make me question, like, is that who should be owning the most amount of farmland in the world and pushing forth, medical, solutions, yeah. So, like I
Yeah,
said, I risk sounding like a conspiracy theorist, but somebody needs to talk about this shit.
well, exactly. And I think you're right. And it's not to say that someone like Elon's always got it right, but the point is he's slipped through the net of control, and there are certain voices
Yeah.
now that are there, and you're one of them, that are there being fighting for that wealthy spiritual warrior, but not just that, fighting for the obvious transfer of wealth that's going to happen. Trillions of dollars are going to flow from baby boomers into the next generation. And what you're saying is the new generation don't think like the old generation, but they're also more aware of what actually the game was, and they don't want that game. And so, where's that going to go? Where's that going to take us? And how can we serve and make an impact? I think that's the biggest part, is to call out that this is all about making an impact, and being that wealthy spiritual warrior. You don't have to not want wealth, like that's fine, but where are you putting it? Where are you
Yeah,
directing it?
exactly. Exactly.
Like success, it's a new definition of what success is, because back in JP Morgan's era and the Vanderbilts and all of these guys, just a money and competition game, and I'm going to smash my competitors. And now it's about collaboration, right? Or what, I think you used a different word, was it
Co-opetition. It's like
coopetition? Yeah.
cooperative competitions. Yeah.
So when we stack that up, is this where it's going then? It's a conscious thought revolution. It's about shifting to thoughtfulness and not thoughtlessness. I think you say this in the book a lot, and that's what aligns with curiosity.
Yeah.
Is that?
Yeah. Well, yeah. So, uh, our thoughts are the most powerful currency that we have. It is, so when I talked earlier about how does reality actually get rendered, it gets rendered through the thoughts we're having. And
Mm.
each one of our thoughts has a frequency. And if it's a low frequency, then our reality is going to be one that's challenging and difficult and one that we become a victim to. But if we increase the frequency of our thoughts, then our reality shapeshifts and becomes one where we see that our reality can be one in which is a reflection of our high frequency state, our high vibrational state. And so, how do we increase the frequency of our thoughts? Well, first and foremost is actually doing the deeper work on ourselves and actually understanding all the aspects of ourself that need to be healed and integrated, all the pre-verbal trauma stuff, all the stuff growing up when we were told we're not enough and, you're not good enough, you won't amount to anything, and, there's something wrong with you. All of these ideas, whether it was from your parents or your teachers or somebody in a position whose opinion you really took in as the truth, it almost like hardwired your code. It codes you and
Mm.
creates these mechanisms in your brain, which then continue to cycle these low frequency thoughts throughout your life. And so a conscious thought revolution is the opportunity and ability to transcend these thoughts and realize you can have your own thoughts. So one question I always ask when I'm coaching a founder or I'm looking at, investing in a company, I'll ask the founder is the question of like, even in this moment right now, if you're to just pay attention to your thoughts, are your thoughts having you, or are you having your thoughts? And I'll tell you that in most cases, your thoughts are having you. Your
Mm.
thoughts are driving you versus you driving your thoughts. That's a conscious thought revolution, is when you don't have to listen to the thoughts anymore that don't serve you, the maladaptive code that is holding you back and making you think that you're just subject to a system and a cog in a wheel, but you're not. You're an infinite being. You are the universe, experiencing and expanding itself. And so this is like some of the tenets of having a conscious thought revolution. And there was this study out of Stanford, I believe, where they were able to measure between 40 and 60,000 thoughts per day. Think
Wow.
about that. You're having between 40 and 60,000 thoughts per day. That means that over the course of about 17 or 18 days, you've invested 1 million thoughts.
Mhm.
So where did you invest your last 1 million thoughts? What was the ROI on those 1 million thoughts? And where are you going to invest your next 1 million thoughts? And so this is a conscious thought revolution. What if I could give you like a Fitbit for your thoughts? What if you could measure the quality of your thoughts and you could look real time? All because most of these thoughts we're having, these 40 to 60, most of them are unconscious. It's the programming that's running. This is what I mean. The
Mhm.
program is running nonstop. And so when you can have this, I referred to this before, when your metacognitive awareness, which is really the ability to view and think about your thinking, so thinking about your thinking and actually seeing your thinking and zooming out and seeing that process play out, then you're able to have the spaciousness to be like, oh wait, you can see the thoughts moving without actually being taken by them. And so that spaciousness, to do that, is it requires, it requires work, it requires deep work, it requires going into the depths of your own psyche and looking at some of these, belief systems that you took on, and doing whatever it takes to unhinge from them. And sometimes it's uncomfortable because you have to look at an aspect of yourself. You're like, oh wow, that's how I am, that's how I show up in the
Mhm.
world, that's how I show up in my relationships. I still do these unconscious behaviors. And we don't want to see that because it's challenging and difficult to see because we're so identified with our ego. And so that's the part where be the lion. You have to be the lion and have the courage and look at the aspects of yourself that need the healing and integrating, because though even those parts of ourself that are showing up in unconscious ways that sometimes sabotage our reality or sabotage our relationships, it's just doing it from a place of protection because we were told at a young age that we're
Mhm.
not good enough. And so it's confronting those, healing those, integrating those, so that you can transcend and have a conscious thought revolution and be in a space of creation and move outside of the three-dimensional world, right? Like the matrix operates in the 3D world. So when you're able to unplug from the matrix and kind of connect to your higher cosmic self, your soul, your spirit, then you can plug back into the matrix and you can play it a little bit different. You're like, oh
Mhm.
wait, I get the code now. I get how the system works. I get how my system works. I get how I interface with it. And I talk a lot about in the book, the Steve Jobs coined the term the reality distortion field, which
Mm.
is the field through which your reality is created. So when you learn to interface with it, it's extremely powerful, because for most of us, what gets projected onto our reality distortion field is from external inputs, whether that's our parents, our friends,
Mm.
society, culture, media, social media. Our reality is being projected on our reality distortion field, and then we see that as real. But when we realize that we actually have the power to shift what's on our reality distortion field through the power of conscious thought, then we're like, oh wait, the reality that I was living before was actually not real reality. That was just one that was curated for me. Now I'm going to curate my own reality.
Wow, yes, and in the book you talk about that being in relation to Steve Jobs and like impossible tasks or possibility, and the fact that
Yeah.
you made people go back and that they had that program, they thought it wasn't possible, and obviously he was running on a different program there.
Yep.
That's super exciting, and obviously thoughts are things, and so to be honest, it isn't obvious, right? We've had books like The Power of Now and Viktor Frankl, which when you were talking, it was reminding me of that thing where he's talking about there's a time between the emotion that or there's a time between you reacting and in that space you can then control it. But this is going a little bit higher than that in the sense that thoughts are things. The highest vibration of thought is truth, and when you get in and you focus on the inner, you can start to live in abundance in that place of plentifulness because you're tapped into a different place. So how does one zoom out, right? If you're like, hey, Gordy,
Mm,
you are speaking truth, my man, like I want more of this, but I just can't.
yeah.
I seem to get hooked on this pattern. I react when someone says something, I get angry. I'm just stuck in this pattern. Like what would you do and say to someone that wants to experience more abundance and freedom of thought to rewrite that program? What is the first thing they should do?
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, let's do a little experiment right now. So as you're sitting here and we're having this beautiful conversation, so just pay attention and notice, where inside of yourself are you right now? Where do you notice yourself?
I'm flipping between my head and my heart. I can feel my head going to be like cerebral because I'm like, right, I've got these questions for Gordy that I there's burning questions here that I want to answer. And then there's heart when you are hitting the spot, I'm in my heart and I'm like, wow, this is like lighting me up all over the place. So I feel like I flip between the two.
And how do you make that transition? What's your process?
Um, Feeling. Think when
Mm-hmm.
you say something that's awe-inspiring or taps on a different level, my brain
Mm-hmm.
switches off and I go, I'm just here, I'm present. For me, in this
Mm-hmm.
conversation because you're
Mm-hmm.
connecting with me here, and I'm like, well, I can't stop that. It's
Yeah.
there, and then I'll go back to
Yeah.
this is a podcast. You've got questions, Tim. Stop getting carried away. Stop thinking about all the
Yeah.
different things because you want to go off on a tangent, and I could sit here for hours talking to you. Yeah.
Yeah. And what do you notice happens to your physiology and in especially your breathing when you're able to even witness that you're transcending when moving between,
Mm.
different aspects of yourself, what's happening to your breathing?
The breathing when I'm in a heart place is a lot more regular. Like it's a lot more chilled. It's a lot more free. I feel. Um, the cerebral part, the mental part is probably more at a different pace, right? It's you're in a rhythm,
Mm,
but it's a different rhythm. It's a more of a there's a mission in this sense. Whereas when I'm here, I'm at peace in
yeah.
that sense. I'm really, really
Yeah.
present. I can't really, yeah, softer.
So even as you and I are now, we've shifted gears from, what I'll call performative to some
Mm.
degree to now genuinely really being curious about what we're experiencing in the real moment. What are you noticing in that's happening to you? Like, I mean, for the viewer, like viewing your face and even just your physiology, I'm noticing what's shifting, but I'm curious for you to share. What are you noticing when we're getting like I know there's that part of you that's still like, oh, we're doing a podcast, we gotta have questions, but what are you
Mm.
noticing as we've just changed gears?
I think just in the last sort of 1 minute of doing this, you let go of the pre-perceived conditions that you think that this needs to go a certain way, be a certain way for society, like for anything, for whatever. You have an expectation. So you let go of the expectations and you're just here. So you're potentially being more real, I would say. I feel more real. I
Yes.
definitely feel more at ease. And not to say that we weren't at ease before, because we certainly were. And it's a different, like I think the performative aspect that you hit on is that's the word. It's performance mindset versus a this is just me and Gordy. We're doing an experiment here,
Yeah.
and it's very real.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's it. That's it. What you and I are doing right here is what I invite everybody to do, because what you're doing is you're expanding your awareness real time in the present moment. We're not trying to look good for the audience. We're not trying to think about a story to tell to sound cool. We're just being real. We're being raw, and we're paying
Mm.
attention to what's happening to our system. We're paying attention to our consciousness moving inside of our body, what's happening to our breathing. And what happens even in that moment, at least for me, is the nature of reality is shifting.
Mhm.
Even for me, all of what you said is like, I feel much more connected to you now. I feel much more connected to you, Tim, the spirit and the soul, than I did as Tim, the podcast host. Right. So
Right.
it's a deepening of our human experience. And we can do that immediately, real time, which is really beautiful and powerful. And so part of that is just checking in the moment of like, okay, where am I actually? What am I
Mm.
really feeling? What's happening to my system? And so those are some of the, and you know what's beautiful? It's crazy. It's like, you know, you and I have done a lot of like, we've invested a lot of our time and energy and money into personal development and growth. And what's crazy is those like all of the most powerful tools are free. Like breath work is the most powerful and potent tool to do this kind of work and show up and have a conscious thought revolution, expand our awareness even in this moment. Like one of the things I always ask, somebody that I'm working with is like, how shallow or deep is your breathing? Like, is your breath just right about here, or are you actually taking it down all the way in and through your body? And when you do, even your perception of time begins to slow, and you're able to shapeshift reality. And guess what? That was free. I didn't have to sign up to some, crazy course or, program or go to Tony Robbins or whatever. It's just like, and what's cool is like, things like breath work have been taught for thousands of years, different ways to breathe. So I would say, just start with even something as simple as that, is check in with yourself and ask, am I having my thoughts, or are my thoughts having me? Another one is, am I feeling my feelings, or am I thinking my feelings? And
Mm.
then another one is, am I connected to my breathing? And when you connect to your breathing and you real, because your breathing is like, it's kind of like it's like the brake and the gas, right? And most of us, it's on autopilot. It's like Tesla autopilot. The breathing is just doing itself. But what's crazy is, and Wim Hof has been, a profound teacher in this, is that you can work with your breathing to achieve altered states of consciousness. You can have a full-on DMT experience just by working with your breath work. And so these are some of the tools that I would, yeah, to your question, of how, what would I recommend? These are some of the tools I would recommend to just start with. And then you can dive deeper as you begin to become more aware of your nervous system. And that's been a big one for me, is really developing a deeper relationship to the nervous system, so that I can really get into, because, most of us are in sympathetic. Our nervous system is in sympathetic, which is fight or flight. So
Mm.
even when we have like a disagreement with a significant other or something, our nervous system perceives that as a threat, like we're being chased by a lion, but we're not really.
Mm.
It's, and so we train and connect to our nervous system, and we train it to be in parasympathetic, which is rest and digest. We don't have to perceive these things as real threats. We're able to continue to hold a place of love and have clear boundaries for ourselves, and also communicate consciously to, whether it's a business partner, a client, a loved one, or even if it's road rage and someone gives you the middle finger, you could just smile and say, I love you too.
Mm. I think that's really important. Like just that ability to like literally people should do that if they're in that situation.
Yeah.
Literally, just tell them forgive them on the spot and not pick up that energy. Like, and then because when we start
Yeah.
to see this as currency and energy and state and like you just took us all on an exercise. I think everyone should just rewind the last 5 minutes and do that because that's exactly what you should do when you're coming. What does it mean then if your emotions are having you? Like I think the second point you meant was, am I thinking my feelings or feeling my feelings? Like, okay, I'm thinking my
Yeah.
feelings. Like I'm in fear.
Yeah.
What is that? How do I move through that?
Yeah, that's man, that is so This is some of the most powerful work you're scratching the surface on. And I'm grateful for you having this conversation and us talking about this because we're having an impact. Even we're having an
Mm.
impact on each other for us to hold space for this conversation. Most men, most men especially, we've been taught not to feel our emotions. Like for me as a boy, if I cried, it was like, no, don't cry, be strong, or hold on. Like it's weak to show emotion,
Mm.
and so that's part of the programming again that I was talking about. We get coded with this. Well, I'm not supposed to feel my emotions. I'm supposed to be strong and tough because I'm a man, and so a part of this shift in consciousness that's occurring is realizing, I talk about, the 2000s was the time of physical health. It was that decade was the decade of physical health. So you saw all of these fad diets like the Atkins diets and all of these things come online. And then the 2010s was the mental health, especially after the financial collapse. The 2010s decade was the decade of the mental health. So a lot of mental health awareness started
Mm.
popping up and people started realizing they need to take care of the mental health. The 2020s, which we're in now, the decade is the decade of emotional health and emotional awareness and realizing that we're emotional bodies. And when we don't actually somatically feel our emotions, they get stuck. And in Chinese medicine, they call that, qi, the
Mm.
energy is stuck. And that if enough energy, emotional energy gets stuck, it becomes a disease, an
Mhm.
illness, and we
Mhm.
we we develop some kind of autoimmune disease or some kind of ailment or sickness. So it's really important to move the emotion through your body, whether it's sadness or guilt or fear or shame and anger. It's important to move it not towards somebody,
Mhm.
because then you're just perpetuating a story and a narrative. But one of the exercises, and I talk about this in the book, is like go into the forest and scream at the top of your lungs, swear if you need to, have to chop wood, get the kinetic energy of the emotions out, let it move through your body, let your body feel it and move through it so that it clears it. But if you're not clearing it, and if you're not feeling it and you're just thinking it, then your unprocessed emotions again become thoughts that don't serve you. And then you'll blame you'll be in a story of blaming people. Oh, it's that person's fault. You'll be
Mm.
a victim, like, oh, poor me. Like, you'll have these thought loops and thought patterns that are still stuck to emotion inside of your body, and then they become these behavior patterns or conflict inside our relationships. So if you want to heal yourself or your relationships, you got to work. That's why the emotional, like, fluidity is so important. And like, this is one of the things, like, when you see children that aren't told not to feel their feelings, they'll have a tantrum, and if you just hold space and let them and love them through their tantrum, they're so clear on the other side. They're clear and
Mm.
they're complete and they're good. It's done. And it's moved on. But if you stifle it and you're like, don't cry, it's bad to cry, that's going to show up in something, and you'll start noticing sometimes kids will start like biting their thumbs or their skin, or they'll pick up some kind of tick because that emotion is still stuck. And that's why dogs, if you notice dogs, they do their shake because they're moving their emotional energy. They're moving the energy and they clear it right away by doing the shake. And so for humans, when you're doing an emotional process, sometimes you'll actually shake like a dog. So sometimes when we take people on this process, when we get them into the state of parasympathetic, their body will start shaking and vibrating because they're moving all of that stuck energy.
Wow.
And so, yeah, so this is like some of the powerful stuff. And then the last thing I wanted to say on that is like 2030. It was the physical health was the 2000s, mental health was 2010s, emotional health is the 2020s, and the 2030s is going to be about spiritual health. And you're ahead of the curve. Like, if you're listening to this, we're already ahead of the curve. We have a head start, and it's time to really have our spiritual awakening, because as we get close to singularity, and singularity
Mm.
is when AI and humans merge and become one, as that comes online, a lot of humans are going to be really fighting hard to connect to their spiritual center. And it's going to be harder to do that because they're going to be driven by artificial intelligence. So now's the time to start doing the work and connect to yourself, your spiritual self, your higher self, your soul.
Oh man, when you were speaking, I was thinking like, is it 2030? And I was thinking, when's the spiritual coming? Like, I'm looking forward to that decade. Like, that's going to be great. But like, you've hit on a point. Then the point is that people have got to start doing the work now, and I think that's really key because the world's already ahead of you technologically, like with the exponential age of technology and the growth. And like the next 5 years, the world won't look like it looks. Things will be done at different, productivity will go through the roof. Like things are going to change in ways that we can't even fathom now. And perhaps even we're not even going to see it because it will be the layers of the world that are changing and the rails and how the world operates. And then suddenly it'll be upon us. And that's where the spirituality and the connection is going to be. The distance between where the world is and where you are is going to be more apparent than it is today, but it's shifting. This is this has been great. And I know you're a dad of three, like the I'm a dad of two. And one of the ways and one of the things you also talk about in the book was the autonomous sensory meridian responses and the fact that like even
Mhm.
videos for kids, like they're building in these mechanisms from unboxing and how that spikes us to have a brain orgasm or whatever it is to keep us hooked. Like it's important to know that these things are at play already, and we need to be detaching from things like technology.
Yeah, that's a tough one for parents, my like us included, is like how do we help our young children develop healthy relationships to technology?
Mm,
We can't like I don't think it makes sense to be like no technology, like you stay away because you know it's really important to help them foster and cultivate healthy relationships versus now and early on. And so the constant struggle is screen time. How much screen time do I let them have? What do I let them watch? And I think, and this is something we're continuing to work on and work through and explore, and I think a lot of it has to do with just being present with them.
mm,
If we're present with them and engaging with them, whether they're playing Minecraft or
mhm,
learning how to build a rocket on YouTube or whatever they're doing inside of an engagement with a screen, it's important for us to be present as well and have our energy so we're exploring with them. And when
mm,
that's part of it, and then the other side thing that we do is because like screens and these kinds of technologies emit like EMF and they also emit positive ions which dysregulate our nervous system. We always say that we spend at least an hour out by the in the forest, by the ocean, under the sun, because then we're able to get the negative ions and replenish our body and our system so that we can counterbalance the impact of screens. So those are the couple ways that we're looking at it. But it's I mean, we're living in a time like you and I when we were kids, like we didn't have like this powerful computer like known as a
right.
phone that was hooked onto us all day every day, right? Like I think that what was it, the computer that sent the astronauts to the moon was far less more powerful than the phones that we carry around today. And so we're living in different times, and so it's a question that's ongoing. And I think for us as parents, it's an important one. Yeah, it's an important one to help them cultivate healthy relationships with technology. And I think a big part of that is by helping them connect to nature, because when children are connected to the natural world, then they're able to understand and develop relationships with technology so that they can grow and learn how to use technology as a force for good, because they
Mhm,
fall in love with the natural world, so they can
mhm,
see like, oh, how do I use tools and technology to protect Mother Earth? And so, yeah, but if you have other ideas or suggestions, I'm all ears as well, because I think all parents are moving through this question of what's the right way to
mhm.
develop healthy relationships with kids in tech.
I think a lot of the parents will have definitely resonated with that. Anyone that's got a kid will know Minecraft and know what that means and know, yeah, you're spent there building oh, the lava comes out. Oh, there's water. Oh, there's snow. There's polar bears. What? Yeah, totally get that, Gordy. Like this has been beautiful. And like there are many more. If I switch back into my performance mode, there are many more questions I
Yeah.
want to talk about, but I know that we have the kind of remit of time and we need to move this on. Even the fact that Bhutan has shifted to gross domestic happiness, like there's some great stuff. And I think you are a visionary in so many areas, and the book and your work with CTR, like it shows that, because you are being visionary in all of these aspects. And so I'd really encourage people to look at your work, look at your book, and look at it, because it's going to really help them from whatever lens they're currently in. It's about expansion. This, your book and your philosophy,
Yeah.
I can see that it's all about awareness in certain domains that are the future, which is what a visionary does. So truly, thank you from the bottom of my heart for you coming on the show, sharing your wisdom. Where can we send people for you? Where should they go if they want to connect with you and find out more about CTR and Gordy?
Yeah, yeah. So we, CTR currently operates as a, venture capital fund. So we actually invest in entrepreneurs and technologies that are measurably accelerating the evolution of human consciousness. So we're looking for technologies like one of our investments is, the Aura Ring.
Yes, I
It's
do.
a
Yes.
it's a ring that, yeah. So these are examples of companies that you are using data as a force for good.
Mm,
So if so that's what CTR is operating as, and plus we're putting out a lot of content around helping people hack their thoughts and do some of
mhm.
this work that we talked about. So you can go to ctr.com, and if you want a copy of the book, get yourself a copy of the book, The New Millionaires Playbook, and you can go to newmillionaireспlaybook.com or order yourself one off of Amazon, or if you want to hear my soothing voice, you can order it on Audible and listen to me
Yes,
narrate it. And everybody who gets the book also, they one of the things in chapter 7 you'll learn about is I've been studying the art and science of manifesting,
mm,
and so I've developed this 7-minute meditation. It's called the magic meditation, and you only need to do it 7 minutes a day, and you'll start noticing that you're able to engineer synchronicities in your life, which are again the feedback signals from the universe that you're manifesting. And so you can access that and play with that and experiment with that as well. And yeah, it's been a pleasure, Tim. Thank you for being you. Thank you for holding the heart space for a deep, meaningful conversation. And I look forward to the next one.
much appreciated, Gordy. Thanks so much.
Pleasure.